Hey guys, these are my notes on healing Mythic plus Halls of Valor as a casting Mistweaver. I'll try and cover the basics, meaning where I like my cooldowns, important mobs to help CC and interrupt, and commonly unavoided damage that you shouldn't have to heal through, but probably will. Champions do moderate tank damage, but on Fortified, Raging, or just on high keys, make sure you don't get caught off guard if they all cast Power Strike at once, which can easily kill a tank if they don't have mitigation up for it. When they're not being interrupted, Thundercallers fire bolts at random people, which you'll want to spot heal, but they also put a bomb on one player at a time that puts a dispellable dot once it goes off. On the pack with a Storm Drake, you might want to stay at range if your group is all melee, so you can bait out the lightning storms. If these do end up in melee, it's easy and pretty common for DPS to dodge out of it right into something worse like the Drake's Frontal Breath. I like to use cooldowns here to play it safe, since tank health can get pretty spiky between power strikes and breath, but overall it's not that bad of a trash pack. Heimdall is really simple to heal, assuming people are avoiding the two mechanics they're supposed to. Roughly every 40 seconds he'll cast Horn of Valor, and aside from healing the tank through some pretty standard damage, this is the only group damage anyone should take. So don't fixate on topping people off right after the Horn if it's going to get you too distracted or killed by another mechanic. You'll have plenty of time to top everyone off after you're safe. If your ranged DPS tends to crowd close to melee, or if you don't have any ranged at all, Whirling Blades become a lot more dangerous, since you'll probably have to spot heal some avoidable damage from people getting ticks from it. On the way to Hersha, there's a few deadly trash mobs. Rune Carvers cast Etch, which is a massive, channeled, interruptible dot. On high enough keys or on fortified weeks, you can easily lose someone to one or two ticks of this, so if you're going to help interrupt, that's the one. Shield Maidens do a Mortal Hue frontal that they wind up, and in my experience, melee are always getting hit by this, so you might have to spot heal a bit, otherwise they can easily get finished off by just about anything else. This can get worse if you have a tank who spins or drags things around unpredictably, so just watch out. In the main hallway, if your tank pulls a sentinel with other mobs, just be aware that his aura makes them immune to all CC, so you'll have to heal through whatever they're doing, so Thundercaller's bolts, Rune Carver's Etch, and so on. On the steps headed up to Hersha, there's more Shield Maidens, which means a lot more frontals for your melee to avoid. As long as you're interrupting the Purifier, these packs should be 100% tank damage. Just watch out for the shield beam that the Aspirant does. She'll always cast it back towards the tank from wherever she jumps to, and this is usually a one-shot if anyone stands in it, even a tank sometimes. I'd recommend going for Solstin before Olmir, so you can use Yu'lon or any other cooldowns you'd like for his storms and still have them up for the boss. Depending on the level of key you're running, whether it's tyrannical or fortified, and what other affixes you're dealing with, think about staying on the lightning side for 2 Eye of the Storm casts, if you think you can heal through it. Just make sure you have a personal lined up for each one to take the pressure off of self-healing. For me, that's Fortifying Brew for the first storm, then Dampen or Diffuse for the second, and whatever's left for the following ones. I can usually get the first storm without spending anything major, just precasting some Renewing and Enveloping Mists, and then spamming Vivify with or without Soothing Mist. If you're confident you can heal through it, tell your group to save their big defensives for the next one. Between storms it's just a matter of powering through the periodic damage from Chain Lightning, which is worse if you have a lot of melee or if your group stacks up a bunch. I go into the second storm with the same prep as before, this time with Yu'lon so I can spam Enveloping and Vivify to outpace the damage. If I feel things slipping a bit, I'll cocoon someone or hit Revival, since I need to be ready for the extra damage from Chain Lightning that comes right after the storm. The biggest danger, in my opinion, is when thundering happens during a storm. At least for me, seeing the lightning strikes is really hard when you're already in a blue bubble. If the damage you take from getting hit isn't enough to screw you over, the disruption caused by that brief stun probably will, not to mention if any of the DPS get hit, which only makes things worse for healing. If the key is low enough, depending on how Double Storm goes, you can entertain the idea of a triple, but I wouldn't recommend it unless your group saves their big defensives for the third instead of second. I did it once on a 16 Fortified a few weeks back, and we barely survived. Back in the main hall, it's more of the same, plus Marksman. These Marksmen can do pretty heavy damage with their shots, but the worst they can do is Penetrating Shot, which is a narrow frontal line. I like to keep an eye on them so I can paralyze or stun them when they try, but I also try and ring them back into the group when they disengage, both so the DPS can cleave and so the Penetrating Shot is more obvious when it's happening. On the way to Fenrir, I only know the Muskin, so If that's what you pull, they do some pretty spiky tank damage with piercing horns and a low health and rage, but as long as everyone's avoiding their stomps, they're pretty simple. The wolves before Fenrir leap at a far player and do a ton of damage, so you want to be very quick topping them off, especially on the triple packs. Ring can help if you position it closer to where the wolves are jumping from, but sometimes they go through it anyways. Even after the nerfs, Fenrir is a bit of a pain in the ass. In my experience, the worst thing about him is that his ability order is really inconsistent. Sometimes you get 2 or 3 claw swipes in a row, which you stack to split the damage for and heal through. Sometimes he only does one at a time, between cycling through his leaps, howls, and fixates. I try and outpace the bleed and swipe damage by powering through with regular heals until the first fixate, then I spend Yu'lon sometime after the next leap or swipe, and then I cycle through my defenses from weakest to strongest when I feel a swipe coming. Revival's good in a pinch when we get an unexpected double or triple swipe with nothing in between. And after Yu'lon and Revival are spent and the bleed stacks are getting high, I tunnel through as much healing as possible until we die or he does. Just don't get caught mid-cast when he does Unnerving Howl. One slip up at the wrong time can really mess you up. The 4 kings don't do much aside from tank damage and a random dagger throw, so you can probably DPS for most of them. All of our CC works on the ancestors, so your tank shouldn't have to kite much or at all if you can paralyze the first and use everything else on the second. Depending on your kill order, you might want to help interrupt Unruly Yell when you're dealing with 2 kings at once, since one of these going off can cause a wipe on high keys, especially if it spell locks you. The dot from Skovald's Spellblaze Rush does enough to keep us busy, especially if more than one person gets hit at a time. You want to keep people topped off so they don't get killed if it picks them when they're low, but this is easily done with or without Yu'lon. There used to be a strategy where your group would delay the shield to cover Ragnarok and the first Spellblaze Rush, but since the dot still applies even through the shield, in my experience it's safer to just spread as soon as Ragnarok ends. Savage Blade is just a big hit for your tank to mitigate, but watch their health in case they don't. On Odin, most of the group damage comes each time the giant blades spawn, and this damage gets worse over time since he drops more blades each time as the fight goes on. Eventually you want everyone popping defensives before they materialize, otherwise you want to think about using Yu'lon to keep things stable as early as the second regular phase. Make sure to top everyone off before each set of rune assignments, since the ticking damage is pretty catastrophic and you won't be able to babysit or hard cast heals on anyone while you're chasing down your own. I like to use Fort Brew just before the first set, saving Dampen and Diffuse for the sets after, and I try and save Cocoon for anyone who's low or just slow getting to their rune. Revival's good in a pinch, either for topping people off after the last blades before a rune set, or if I can linger in the center for a moment with the defensive up, it can reach everyone and buy them a little more time to get to their spots, even if it makes me a second or two later getting to my own. We can also help interrupt or throw out Ring of Peace to help with the adds, but DPS should be able to handle this on their own. If they do miss an interrupt on the adds, it's a big shock of group damage, but generally survivable, as long as they don't let a second cast go off from the same add. So those are my notes on healing Halls as a casting Mistweaver. All in all, it's a pretty good dungeon for us, but we can definitely hit a wall on Fenrir or Odin on tyrannical weeks, if the fights drag on past a certain point. I hope someone finds this collection of thoughts useful, even if they're a little bit general. Let me know in the comments if you want more videos like this, and I'll keep them coming. Until next time, thanks for watching, and have a good one!